Hey guys, welcome to another Homelab Series video today. In today's video, it's going to be kind of special because usually I just do like one piece of software and this is how you self-host it. In this case, we're going to be creating actually a few things because essentially I'm going to try to put this all together, but we're going to be making a Grafana dashboard to monitor a Linux machine that is running Node Export that will be ingested with Prometheus, and then that gets created into Grafana to essentially, give you all the visuals getting the data out. So this might be a longer video than usual, but there'll be a lot of good content and it'll be a lot of fun, especially if you're trying to get into doing more like Grafana related things, because I've seen some amazing dashboards. Like, don't get me wrong, I've looked and I was like, holy, I don't even know how some people do it, but there are some cool dashboards. So this is kind of the intro. If you want to just start monitoring a Linux box, this is one way to do it. Obviously there's a lot of other ones, but we're going to just be using one of the community Grafana dashboards that is posted out there to use for the data that's ingested, but you can customize it any way you want. So let's get started. All right. So what we have here is essentially we'll need to create two machines. And the two machines will be related to Grafana and Prometheus, because that's what we'll be hosting for essentially the two services that we'll be using. Node Export will install on an existing server that we want to monitor, so we don't need to create a separate one for that. But in this case, what we'll want to do is update the DNS so that these two new servers will have something that is routable. So we got Prometheus. Is that how you spell it? I think so, yeah. M-E-T-H. Yeah. In a and 120. And then Grafana in a 121. So we'll add Prometheus and Grafana in here. So that will set up the DNS that we need. Then we'll need to set up our Ansible inventory to be able to target the two machines that we'll be creating, so we can spin up two new VMs with it. So we'll add that to our inventory list. So Prometheus and Grafana. Prometheus and Grafana. And we'll commit that. So essentially what we'll have here is now we can create our two VMs, and what we'll be doing is creating them via our essentially Ansible playbooks here with our workflow. So what we'll do with this is we'll actually run both Prometheus and Grafana in a Docker container. So technically I could have put this all in one box, but I'm essentially just separating out services to make it kind of easier to kind of explain and show as everything goes. So the hosting for this, so we'll create the Prometheus one first. IP address was 120. Drag in Prometheus. Capitalize the P here. And then technically we don't have a proxy address for this, because we'll just be using the existing one and we won't be dealing with sets right now. So I'll just do a temp one real quick, and we should be able to launch and it will create. So we'll do the same thing for Grafana, but in this case with the Grafana one, we will actually be able to set up the proxy. So we'll have Grafana is the host name, 121 will be the IP address, so drag in Grafana. And then the proxy will actually be on 3000, so we can hit the web interface with HTTPS here. So we'll hit next here, and technically I could run these back to back, but I'm going to give it a second because I want to make sure that the create VM job actually finished so it doesn't have two conflicting IPs while it's creating the first one. So I want this first one to finish before I actually run the second one because I did enable concurrent jobs. Okay, so it actually already started the VM, cloned, installed stuff. All right. So I want to wait for it to actually finish setting up the VM and the host name here. But while we do that, we can look up Grafana Docker. So there is essentially a few things that you can do. We will actually end up doing a Docker compose in here. I'm assuming that they have one because I remember grabbing it from here. Yeah, so we'll essentially be doing this Docker compose file. So it will be running on 3000. We got the Grafana service here, and we should be good. Actually, and we don't actually need Grafana Enterprise. We're just going to do Grafana itself as opposed to Grafana Enterprise, but that's all right too. All right, so that finished creating that VM, so we'll launch this one, and we should be good when that is good. But what we can do right now while we wait for those two machines to pop up is actually log into our MailCal server that we set up in our latest video and set up Node Exporter. Because Node Exporter will essentially export metrics out that can be grabbed by Prometheus. So what we'll need to do is install wget and tar. And while those install, we'll actually go to the Node Exporter GitHub to get the latest release, actually, because that's what we want. So we'll go to here, and then you can pick up the one that you would be using. So we got actually, I believe we would just be using Linux and AMD 64. AMD 64, that's one. Not the ARM, because I'm not running ARM. So we'll copy that address. We can see it installed. So we can wget, paste the address, and it will grab the tar down. So we can see in here we got the node export tar. So we can extract that on the host, and we will go into that directory. So from here, you can see that there is a binary for Node Exporter. So that's essentially just running the service itself. So we'll do something fancy, actually. So we'll actually move that into user local bin so that you can run it as an exporter. But we'll also add a user that will run this service so that you're not running this as like root because it technically doesn't need root access to gather these stats. And then what we'll do is create a system D service so that we can just run the service itself, and we don't need to actually have run it in like a screen session. So in this case, we'll create a unit. The description will just be node exporter here. We'll want this to start after the network starts, because if the network isn't started, we're probably not working. We'll create the service, and it will run with the user node exporter, the one that we created, and the group node exporter, which would be created when the users create it. Type will just be a simple type, and the execute start command will be the user local bin node exporter that we have here. And then the install will be just wanted by multi-user target. And that's essentially how you set up a service. So after doing that, you actually need to do a daemon reload to pick up the new configuration service. And then we can do a systemctl start on node exporter is what we named it. And it has essentially started. So to validate that that it actually works, you can actually curl localhost at 9,100 metrics, and you should be able to see that it outputs metrics of the machine that Prometheus will pick up that we'll use for our Grafana dashboard. So now we got everything set up here in regards to having the node exporter output that stuff. Next, we'll need to configure our Prometheus to be able to pick that configuration up. So supposedly, I believe my job for creating the Prometheus server running jobs should have finished. So it looks like it has finished as well. So what we can do here is log out of this. We can log into Prometheus.dragon.local. We'll accept the host key and we'll log in. So essentially, this is also another Docker situation, but what we'll do is actually create a Docker script. We won't use the Docker Compose, but I could have done Docker Compose. But we'll essentially do a Docker run on the port 9090, and we'll echo 9090 out as well. And we'll have the volume for hooked up for the configuration file. So there's a configuration file that it will use, which is a YAML, and we'll mount that to Prometheus.YAML. And if I wrote any of those wrong, that would be really weird, but it wouldn't be wrong because spelling it Prometheus. Okay, the spelling looks right. And then we'll just make a persistence volume that will just hold the data for Prometheus. So if you ever had to recreate the server that still has historical data on it, and then we'll run it in detached mode as well, because essentially we don't want to have it output console. And then we'll grab the image, which is from Prometheus is the image. So before we start it, we'll actually create the Prometheus file in here, and we named it actually YAML, so we'll do that. So there is a few configs that you can look at, but essentially the default config is you have a global, and you have a scrape interval, which is how long you want to scrape. So let's do like 15 seconds in this case. You can set it longer or shorter. The default is, I believe, a minute for it. And then we'll set an evaluation interval as well, and we'll set that also to 15 seconds. Same thing, I think it's also like a minute for default. And then we'll have the scrape configs, which is essentially where it will grab the data from. So in this case, we'll have a job name, and we'll call it node for the node export. And then here we'll have the static configs, which is where it will essentially grab which targets it will grab from. So this is a essentially comma delimited list. So we will essentially do mail cow.dragon.local on 9110 and close it out. But if you had more than one host, you'd comma, put the next host, so on and so forth. And that should essentially be the configuration that we need. So we can cat that file real quick. So you got the global scrape configs, and essentially that is the config. So we can do we created a Docker script. So we need to make it executable, start Docker. And it will essentially pull the configuration down and run it. So we can see in here that it is not running, it actually exited. So Docker logs follow Gallant colon evaluation internal. Oh, I typed it wrong, guys. It's not internal, it's interval. There we go. Interval. Typing is hard some days. So we can actually remove the other one, colon, and then we can do a Docker start again. Okay, so now you can see it's running, it's listening on 9090, which is what we expect. Alright, so now that we got Prometheus set up, what we can do now is log into our Grafana server and set up Grafana here. So we'll log in, we accepted the key. Similar situation, we will need to essentially do a Docker Compose file in here. So what we'll do is essentially copy this, create a Docker compose.yaml, paste that in here. So we'll just do normal Grafana. We're not doing Grafana Enterprise. And if you want to do the volumes as well, to keep data persistent over time, what we'll do is we just make a Grafana directory that will map to varlib Grafana. And I think that's essentially all I need here. So we'll do a docker compose up -d for detach. And it will pull down the Grafana container here to run. And we would essentially go and view it via port 3000, but we can actually use HTTPS. Docker logs follow Grafana. Oh, it's not permission. So technically, actually, let's docker compose down. So actually, I want not a directory. We just want a volume because it actually has specific permissions for it. Okay, you know what? We don't actually need to keep persist. I could actually create a volume if I wanted to. Okay, you know what? We'll just not create a volume. It's fine. Grafana. If you wanted to, you could create a volume. I just don't have the syntax off the top of my head, apparently. This is what happens when you try to make videos and you have like a multi-step video. Alright. So we'll run that. That should work now. So my data won't be persistent. So if this container ever goes away, I pretty much screwed myself. So you want to do a persistence volume for sure. But you can see that it's running on 3000, but we have our Nginx running a proxy for that. So technically, what we should be able to do is do HTTPS grafana.dragon.local, and it will bring us to the login. By default, I believe the login is admin. And you would want to type in a new password here so that you're not using the default password. And we'll hit submit. So now we have Grafana set up. So ideally, this should hopefully be the easy part of it. But what we want to do is actually go to connections over here. We'll add a new connection. We will look up Prometheus. So essentially, we'll add a new data source with Prometheus here. From here, we'll have it be Prometheus. Our server will be HTTP prometheus.dragon.local on 9090. I don't have any authentication set up, so essentially it should just work without needing that. And then we should be able to hit save and test. So essentially, Grafana reaches out to Prometheus to get the data that Prometheus grabbed from Node Exporter. So in here, we can actually hit explore metrics, and we can see that I believe some of these metrics, so the node metrics in here are showing that, things from Node came in. But what we really want to do is have an amazing dashboard, right? So if you go to Grafana Dashboards, there are a ton of dashboards that you can use that they already essentially created for you. Someone's created and shared it out, which is amazing. So the thing that you want to know is, because I'm using Node Exporter, you want to filter by the Node Exporter for Node Export related things. In this case, I ended up just using their very first one, which is the Node Exporter full, which covers pretty much most of the stuff that I would want to see from a Linux thing. So there's a few ways to input this. You can copy the link, you can copy the ID of the clipboard, or copy the ID of this to the clipboard, or download JSON. Personally, I just copy the link and paste it in when I go to my dashboard's new import, and I can just paste it in, hit load, and then in here it'll tell you, hey, which database do you want? So you can have multiple Prometheus things. So in this case, I'll select my one that I just created, and we'll hit import. And then from here, you can essentially get your whole dashboard in regards to the host that you're running. So in this case, I am importing data from MailCow. If I had more, the dropdown will give me more information, but you can see here you get your general gist of CPU, system load, RAM. Apparently I'm using a lot of swap on this, which actually makes sense because I only gave it one gig of RAM as well. So it's probably definitely using a lot of RAM, so I should probably increase this instance. But if you scroll down, there's a ton of other metrics that you can see as well. You can't really tell because it's like the very end, and it's just starting to import, but there's definitely data in regards to all these related things. So you got processes, time sync, miscellaneous system related stuff, hardware if there was hardware related, system D stuff. Some of it might not have any data because it's not actually doing anything in regards to that, but you essentially can get a lot of data in here about your system just out of the box. And Node Exporter might also include more things as well. So this is just a general, hey, if you just want to get started, pretty simple to get started with. So that's pretty much it for this video. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.